Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Irene Garousi-Nejad, who's a research scientist at CUAHSI. CUAHSI is the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science, Inc. At CUAHSI, she contributes to water science research and education and advances their capabilities in hydrologic modeling, data analysis, and cloud computing. Irene is a strong advocate for open science and open data and recognizes their importance in promoting transparency, collaboration, and inclusivity in the scientific community. Before joining CUAHSI, she was a postdoc in Earth System Science at Stanford and earned her PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the Utah Water Research Laboratory at Utah State University. Irene will be speaking with us today about how we can advance fair research software practices with a specific focus on metadata standardization and evaluation. Thanks for being with us today, Irene. I'll now turn it over to you.
Thanks, Alan. Great to be here. And I'm presenting on behalf of a team at CUAHSI, including myself, Anthony Castronova, who is my supervisor, and Abner Bogan, who is on the call. This is related to a project to advance fair for research software practices by exploring metadata standardization and evaluation. So let's just jump into this presentation. I'm sure most of you know that FAIR principles help make scientific data more transparent and reusable. But when it comes to the research softwares, the practices are usually inconsistent. Scientific publications and data sets always get formal credits in visibility, but software, which underlines both of those, often goes unnoticed and do not get that credit. So to address this gap, the FAIR for Research Software, or in short, FAIR for RS, which I'm going to refer to it for the rest of this presentation, principles were developed by a broader community where they adapt FAIR's data-oriented framework to make research softwares actually more discoverable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. In our project, we wanted to examine the current state of metadata for research software and also identify what is missing to improve the fairness of those research softwares by leveraging the model repositories and any of the community infrastructures or the tools that already exist. And these tools, the emerging tools, like I put some examples here, for example, FAIRShare, Howfairis, or FAIRSoft, are all very good first steps. Just to give you an idea, what are these? The FAIRShare is a desktop application that you can install on your machine and run it. Howfairis, it's similar, or it's like a scorecard that does a checking for us as a fail and pass through some guidelines and questionnaires, but it doesn't actually execute any evaluation on the system. And FAIRSoft, lastly, is a software that has been particularly developed for the bioinformatics domain. It leverages a GitHub repo exclusively and requires users to install a GitHub app. So all of these are great, but they face limitations. They are often checklist-based. They struggle with some automation, and also they do not adapt well across different scientific domains. Also, metadata inconsistencies in some cases and fragmented scoring systems further challenge the usability of such tools in their work. So the whole thing, this all tells us that the community needs more scalable and standardized approaches to being able to truly evaluate and improve research software fairness. In this regards, we built a lightweight Python-based evaluation framework to assess the fair compliance of research softwares. This has three main components, which it starts with the standardized vocabularies like schema.org and code meta. These standards are widely adopted and used by the communities. They're flexible, and meaning that the metadata that we generate aligns with the global community practices that is still out there and can be integrated into a broader range of the repositories. The second component of our workflow is a modular evaluation system. Rather than building one rigid scoring system like the three examples that I mentioned earlier, Howfairis, FAIRSoft, and so on, we created extensible evaluation functions which means we can compare now through the system, we can compare, contrast community tools while also allowing the domain facilities and repositories to add their own checks. The results of this work is reproducible, it's customizable scoring system that can be adopted across different disciplines. And the last component of our workflow is the way that we store the outputs of this evaluation system. The outputs are stored and captured in a structured JSON, and they are made available through some dashboards, reports, and visualizations to improve the metadata quality. And this step, in fact, closes the loop by providing actionable feedback to the software developers, to the organizations who maintain those softwares, and communities to improve their software fairness or fair compliance. So here's a high-level design of our workflow throughout a flow chart. I'm going to walk you through the majority of that, but before jumping into it, I want to emphasize that our design is not one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, it allows the hydrology, which is the main community, the community that we are mostly working with, or any other domain to define custom evaluation methods while still using a common backbone behind all of them. This makes it scalable, reproducible, and adaptable across scientific domains. And I'm hoping by the end of the presentation, you get a sense why we are referring to it as referring so many times to the custom evaluation and how it actually helps this scalability and reproducibility of our work. The first step of our design is crosswalking metadata. We map model metadata to code meta, and then we align code meta with FAIR4RS indicators. And those indicators are 17 from the report that has been published. This ensures a common vocabulary for describing the software, the research softwares, while also supporting the domain-specific metadata. So by connecting the community standards like schema.org and metadata with the FAIR principles, we enable this consistent scoring system that still leaves room for community alignment and customization. Moving on, the second key element of the design is a modular evaluation function. We have implemented about 17 reusable functions that validate these specific metadata fields against each of the FAIR indicators. Because each function now is modular, the system can be extended over time by different group of people, by different needs. And the scoring system remains reproducible. So the modular design allows the communities to plug in their own checks and compare existing FAIR tools and focus on the FAIR indicators specifically to their domains. Once the evaluation functions are executed, we pass the result through to the weighted scoring engine. And this step, what it does is actually it normalizes the FAIR scores between 0 and 1, and then applies this weight to reflect community priorities. So as a community, you have control over how do you want to define the weights across the different indicators of FAIR for RS. For example, one community might prioritize interoperability for their research softwares, while another community might emphasize the reusability. So they have the control over this through the weighting system. And this design supports a flexible, community-driven scoring rather than just a one-size-fits-all model or tool. Finally, the outputs are stored in a structured JSON file, which can be visualized and reused in different ways. As an example, we developed some Jupyter notebooks that for a quick exploratory needs, we can use that, or we can run the full workflow through a command line interface, which is useful for integration into CI and CD pipelines. The goal is not just to evaluate fairness, but also to provide actionable results at the end in a formats that can be easy to reuse and compare and integrate across different systems and across different research workflows. And so we decided to test this workflow on one of the model repositories, which is the Community System Dynamics Modeling Systems, CSDMS. Just to give you an overview, what does this model repository contains? As I think at the time that we tested it, it contains about 491 models across different scientific domains. And you can see from the bar chart, those domains include hydrology, coastal, marine, terrestrial, with the terrestrial having the highest numbers of the models across different programming languages, 8 different programming languages. And we thought, okay, this is going to be a good use case for the workflow we developed. And once we tested that, we applied our work framework to this modeling system. We found clear variations in FAIR scores across both the FAIR principles, as you can see on the left-hand side, and across the different model domains on the right-hand side. So the violin plots on the left shows that the findability and accessibility tends to get higher scores across the CSDMS model repository, while the other two lag behind. And that's also visible on the right-hand side through the heat map that shows the domain-specific differences. Some communities or scientific domains do better, for example, with findability, but they struggle with the reusability. So overall, maybe a couple of findings of these results was that across the board, critical metadata, we found that critical metadata like licenses, authors, or identifiers were often missing or inconsistently formatted when we obtained the information from the CSDMS model repository. And also importantly, even some of the highly cited or well-established model fell short on some of the key FAIR indicators, and to name particularly the interoperability and reusability. So this all highlights why standardized metadata practices are essential part for improving our FAIR4RS assessments and evaluation. Just let's take another deep dive into some of those results. We observed that there was a variance in fairness between the domains. What you're seeing on the screen is some charts for different domains, and each of these radar plots show a domain in color. The color represents a domain. The dashed gray line behind them, it's just for all other domains that are shown in gray. We see, for example, for 2 of them, I'm going to just focus on the 2, which is the climate and the hydrology domain. The assessment was performed well in accessibility, but consistently lag in reusability. So all of these domains have their own weaknesses, especially in the interoperability. Smaller domains like human dimensions, which is the chart on the bottom low, reveals uneven patterns. In part, we think that it's due to limited or inconsistent metadata practices in that community when they publish their research softwares on CSDMS. So the main takeaway here is that fairness is not uniform. Different communities, different scientific domains has distinct strengths and weaknesses, and this highlights why our evaluation framework needs to be flexible and customizable for domain-specific priorities and practices. Another thing I want to share with you is that now take a deeper look into different models themselves, which every model has a unique fairness footprint. When we zoom into all of these models, we see that this kind of model level profiling is powerful to analyze, because not only it gives developers direct insight into where their metadata can be improved, but it also opens the door to incentivize such as fairness badges or recognition programs. So the key message is that fair assessment can be both diagnostic and motivational, which in regards help improving the practices while also rewarding progress. Okay, with that, to summarize our work, we make several contributions. First, we develop a lightweight CLI-based workflow that quantifies fairness in research softwares. Secondly, we built modular evaluation functions that support domain-specific customization. So this whole framework is more flexible and scalable compared to the emerging solutions and tools out there. Third, we leverage community vocabularies like schema.org and CodeMeta to standardize the metadata inputs and align our work with a broader effort. Fourth, we tested this approach by encoding the entire CSDMS model repository into the CodeMeta JSONs, which gives a clear view of the current status and current fairness across the Earth system models, which may not have been possible before. And finally, by lowering some of the barriers to tool adoption, this approach helped standardize fair practices, not only in the hydrology domain, but also across multiple domains. The overall takeaway is that fairness in research software can be measured. We show that it can be compared and improved through lightweight, extensible tools. And looking ahead, there are several open questions we are still thinking about, considering as the next steps of this project. Questions like, how can the output summaries be used to improve the sustainability of research softwares? And even beyond that, how can we integrate with domain facilities, with data and model repositories and registries to raise metadata quality and to improve the metadata quality? What incentives or tools do our communities need to make fair practices as a rewarding process? And most importantly, how can all of this accelerate time to science, again, by lowering some barriers, how we can improve the time to science to do the science part and spend time on that. So with that, I'm gonna finish this presentation. Thank you all so much for listening and inviting us. Again, there are two QR codes on the screen. One is to sign up for the CUAHSI newsletter if you are not a member, to get some updates about our work at CUAHSI. And also the second QR is the link to our GitHub repository for this project. This project was supported by NSF through the project called Integrative Cyber Infrastructure for Next Generation Modeling Science. And with that, I'm gonna pause and we'd be happy to answer any question.
Thank you so much, Irene. That was great. Are there any questions to start with? Makes sense?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, thank you, Irene, for this great presentation. It was very insightful. I really enjoyed it, especially since I have a strong interest into, but I'm not the only one here, to have interest into metadata mappings and how you, and I have many questions, especially regarding the, I'd say the beginning point of your workflow to extract the metadata from the models and to map them to code meta for software. I mean, how you go through this, because in my experience, it's a very complex work, and I'm very curious because especially since it's a model from different that are using different source code, that are using that also coming from different domains, certainly related to many papers. I mean, so I'm curious how you have this metadata processing. I mean, to me, that's with the gas of your machine, right? That's really what interests me.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Yeah, great questions. And I would acknowledge here that this whole evaluation from the beginning to the end was possible because right now the CSDMS model repository has done a great job of providing the metadata for each of the models that are being published on their platform. And it made it a huge ease for us to access that metadata. And what we've done was we synthesized those metadata categories or the properties and mapped them through the crosswalks we created to code meta, and then from code meta to the FAIRShare. But throughout the work, we recognize that, for example, for other model repositories, it may not be that easy because the base and the start point is having a good quality metadata that can be mapped to this evaluation framework and system. For the next step, we are considering also the HydroShare data repository, which is not specific for models research software. It contains both models and data from the hydrology domain. And HydroShare also, similar to CSCMS, but maybe not to that extent, document the metadata for the models. And it has a kind of like a list of the properties that a developer needs to provide when they publish their models on the HydroShare. But I totally agree, for communities which there's no practices of documenting their metadata, this would not be, at least that helpful or informative for them.
Thank you so much. I just agree with you because I believe CUAHSI has been very smart on that, to have just to build their own vocabulary to describe the terms, their own terms to describe the metadata. So I believe it was, perhaps you can confirm, but I think it's a uniform vocabulary you're having there. Can you confirm that, Irene? That you're having the, I mean, from a model to another, it's always the same structure of metadata you have.
Sorry, I couldn't follow the second question.
Yeah, my question was from regarding the resource of models you're having at CUAHSI, is it always the same structure? Is it always the same metadata in the same terms? Always the same, you know what I mean? Same describing the metadata.
Oh yeah, great point. Yes, it's right now it's all the same. It's all the same, but it can be extended if they change. Yeah, it changes. And maybe back to the first questions. I know that there are groups, we've seen some presentation and heard from them, that they are incorporating and using AIs to be able to collect the metadata in generative AIs. So maybe making that step easier for the facilitators or the people who create the model repositories to create that metadata, rather than being a very manual step, which is right now for most of the model repositories that we know. So yeah, there are rooms for that.
Thank you.
And I think one of the goals is to, I mean, like the evaluation metrics just operate on code meta. So if you have code meta, if your repository emits code meta, then you should theoretically just be able to run it, right?
So I think some groups might find it challenging to do that crosswalking and mapping between their metadata, domain metadata, into code meta. But once that mapping is done, then the rest of it is all about the automation. It can be applied to that JSON.
Right. And I think it's a great sort of incentive for repositories to adopt if they get evaluation and diagnostics and observability into the fairness of their holdings, or even like research software quality indicators, if we wanted to go that far. So anyway, I think it's a great project. I hope. So I have one question, while unless someone else has something to interrupt, and that would be do you see this as a community open source project that you want to support and kind of invite community contributions to? And would you be open to SciCodes kind of like taking stewardship of it, or do you want to hold on to it yourselves?
Great question. I think the answer is obvious. We definitely want it to be a community-driven project, and we would welcome and accept any contributions outside of the group of the people who are still working on that. This was more like a prototype for us to show that, okay, there are limitations with the tools out there. Even at an organization where they have their own data repository, we were not able to use those tools out there to, for example, just evaluate how HydroShare is doing in terms of the softwares that it is publishing. So the prototype was designed for us throughout that funding from NSF, but we definitely would like for the future work of that, expand the work, especially based on the contribution from the community. And it's all, yeah, open source. And you can find it, as I said, on the GitHub page.
Okay, great. On that GitHub link. Yeah, are there any SciCodes members that want to be the next guinea pig for a automated assessment or a semi-automated assessment to adopt this framework?
The ASCL has open data, so might be a good candidate. Our data are available in JSON already.
Could you please share?
I'll drop a link. Yes, it'll take me a minute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Makes sense?
Sorry, I'm very talkative today. I do have another question. How we can reuse, I mean, where's the link to your workflow if it's open source and can we access it? I mean, because I'm the head of a catalog of metadata for about software and mathematics domain. And having global solution to assess the fairness degree and have fairness metrics for the software, it's something that could really get my attention and it could really be interesting to me. So yes, I'm curious about it. If I can have a look on, if I can use it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's exciting. I think Abner had done a great job on the GitHub repository to document how to use this, even the CLI as a command-based Python kind of function that you can run. The requirements should be that metadata JSON, which maps to the code meta. And there are also documentation of how you can do that. But we would be happy to help if, yeah, at some point, any of you would like to reuse it. And that's correct, Alan. And I would say that the code is under the develop branch, not the main branch. So all the whole work is under the develop branch of that repository.
Okay, great. We have Pete and then Anna.
So, Irene, thank you. That was a great talk. I have less of a question and more of your where do we go slide here and tools and incentives. Just from my scientific domain, whenever I see incentives, I always think by community, it's either if the funders require it or the journals require it. That's the primary incentive to get people moving. If it's built into the tooling automatically, that helps, but really those seem to be the levers for making significant movements. So.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Great point. Yeah, we are also brainstorming about all of those incentives, and as you said, the requirements from the funder, that's the best thing. But what we are thinking about the incentives are if this tool can automatically be run on a model repository and the information can be put on each of the model resources and shared with the model developers for the visibility of their work, even they can say, well, that tool was automatically run on my model repository and I got this score or this badge or whatever in terms of the fair compliance. And they can reuse that also in their reports back to the funders and also share with the community.
Oh. Thank you again.
Anna?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. That was great, Irene. Yeah, I guess my comment was related as far as motivational assessment. I really liked your visuals, and I think they are motivational. So I represent the CUAHSI, Science Explorer, and we are interested in model metadata as well as everything else. So I think we could easily expose those within CUAHSI, make them visible. And then, that might be motivational for model development. Of course, if we do something like that, then the automated assessment needs to be rerun on a regular basis. So there needs to be a workflow and something to think through, I guess. So yeah, I mean, if there's if you'd be interested in working on that, I'd be happy to help you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we can set up some kind of uh almost if we expose metadata in a consistent and standardized way, and that's something that I think we're working towards in general after the workshop, then all of this might be easier, right? Because then the tool just has to know how to operate on this single bridge to our repositories. So that's another incentive for all of us to try to figure out how to emit code meta in the same way, same or similar ways. If there's no other questions, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you again, Irene, for the great talk, and Abner and Tony as well, who's not here.
A pleasure. Thank you.